It was a quiet afternoon, just another normal day at the local parking lot, until the unthinkable happened. I never imagined a simple trip to the store would end in a confrontation that would shake us to the core. My grandfather, a man who's always kept to himself, was minding his own business when a woman, known around our neighborhood for causing trouble, decided to escalate things. She wasn't just upset, she was furious. And what started as a minor disagreement quickly escalated into something far worse. This HOA Karen, as everyone calls her, didn't just yell, she physically attacked my grandfather, punching him right in front of the store. But what she didn't know, he wasn't just some random senior citizen. He was a sheriff, retired but still sharp, and capable of handling himself when needed. As the scene unfolded, I couldn't help but feel the tension in the air. It was as if time stood still. Now, we're left with questions. What sparked this outrageous attack? And how will the community react once they learn who my grandfather really is? Stay tuned, because things are about to get intense, and the story isn't over yet. To understand what happened that day, you need to know a bit about my grandfather. He's not the kind of guy who likes to make waves. He spent his career as a sheriff, working long hours and putting his life on the line. After retirement, he just wanted peace and quiet, enjoying the simple things in life, like his daily walks, gardening, and spending time with family. He wasn't one for confrontation, and he always avoided drama. But the one thing you could always count on him for, standing up for what's right. That's where this whole HOA mess comes in. Our neighborhood is tight-knit, but ever since the new HOA board took over, things have been different. People started getting letters for the smallest things, like parking too close to the curb or not trimming the hedges just right. The board became more and more aggressive, and soon enough, my grandfather, being the kind of person who doesn't let things slide, found himself at odds with them. It all came to a head when this woman, the one who would later punch my grandfather, started making complaints about his yard. She was the head of the HOA, and she had a reputation for being tough on the residents. So when she approached him that day, it was more than just a casual conversation. It was a confrontation waiting to happen. What happened next would change everything, and nobody expected it. As the tension grew between my grandfather and the HOA, it was hard not to notice how much this woman, Karen, seemed to thrive on power. She enjoyed making people uncomfortable, and she made sure to remind everyone in the neighborhood that she held the strings. But it wasn't just her tough stance on the rules, it was the way she manipulated things. No matter how small the infraction, she made sure to report it, often exaggerating situations or making things seem worse than they were. It wasn't long before she had the whole neighborhood on edge, including my grandfather. One day, my grandfather received a letter from the HOA. His lawn was too overgrown. He hadn't even had time to mow it, with everything going on in his life. But when Karen showed up to hand-deliver the letter, it felt more personal. She had a smirk on her face, like she was enjoying every second of it. My grandfather, not one to back down, politely told her he would take care of it as soon as he could. But Karen wasn't satisfied with that. She didn't just want him to fix it. She wanted him to be afraid, to feel like he was powerless. When the day came and they crossed paths in the parking lot, it wasn't just about the yard anymore. It was about power, control, and respect. She was angry, more than usual. Her words cut deep, accusing him of ignoring her requests and disrespecting her authority. But what she didn't see coming was the calm in my grandfather's eyes that had seen far worse than a HOA complaint. Still, that moment, as she got in his face, pushing him further and further, seemed to snap something in her. Then, without warning, her fist flew through the air, landing squarely on his shoulder. What happened next was a blur. My grandfather didn't retaliate immediately, but you could see the quiet fury in him. I watched from a distance, feeling the heat of the situation, knowing something bigger was about to unfold. I kept wondering, why had she gone this far? What was really behind all this? And why had she chosen today to escalate everything? Something didn't feel right, and I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't just about a lawn or a parking spot anymore. The punch left the air thick with tension. My grandfather stood there for a second, not moving, not reacting. The world seemed to pause around us. Karen, on the other hand, was practically shaking with rage, her breath coming in quick bursts. For a moment, it seemed like everyone around us had frozen. People from nearby shops had started to gather, but they weren't stepping forward. It was almost as if they were waiting for someone to make the next move, not knowing what to expect. That's when my grandfather spoke, his voice calm, but it carried an authority that seemed to shift the entire atmosphere. "You made a big mistake," he said, looking her square in the eyes. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Karen's face turned pale, and for a split second, she looked like she might back down. But then she took a step back, almost like she was realizing the gravity of what she had done. There was no apology, no remorse, just a cold stare as she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. But I could feel the storm wasn't over. She had taken the first swing, but it wasn't the last punch that would be thrown today. As Karen walked off, I couldn't help but feel a gnawing sense of unease. This wasn't just about a fight in a parking lot anymore. This felt like the beginning of something bigger, something far more complicated. Why had she chosen to attack him like that? What was really behind her anger? My mind raced with questions, but it wasn't until later that I realized how deep this rabbit hole truly went. Something dark was simmering under the surface, and we hadn't even scratched the tip of the iceberg. I had no idea how much trouble we were in, but it was clear this was just the beginning. The rest of that day felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that there was more to Karen's outburst than just a simple HOA dispute. But I pushed it aside, figuring maybe it was just her over-the-top behavior getting under my skin. I didn't know how wrong I was. It wasn't until later that evening when my phone rang, and I saw the caller ID. It was my grandfather, but something in his voice when he picked up made my stomach drop. He was calm, but there was an edge to his words I hadn't heard before. "You need to come over," he said, his voice tight. "There's something you need to see." When I arrived at his house, he was sitting in the living room, staring at something in his hands. His usual relaxed demeanor was gone, replaced with a look of deep concern. I sat down next to him, waiting for him to explain. He held up a small envelope, one that looked like it had been slipped under the door. Inside, there was a single piece of paper, and on it was a message. Nothing more, nothing less. *You don't know who you're messing with. It hit me like a punch to the gut. My grandfather's eyes narrowed as he spoke, his voice low. "This wasn't just about me or my lawn. Someone is behind this, and I think they've made it personal." My heart raced. The message was a warning, but who was it from? Was it Karen, or was there something else brewing beneath the surface? As if on cue, my grandfather's phone buzzed. When he answered, his face went pale. I could hear the fear creeping into his voice, even though he tried to mask it. "What do you mean she's gone?" he asked, his tone tense. The silence that followed sent a chill down my spine. It seemed like Karen had disappeared, completely. No one knew where she was. There were no calls, no messages, just gone. I felt the weight of the situation sink in. Whatever Karen had been mixed up in, it was way bigger than a parking lot fight or a complaint about a lawn. Now, it was a game of cat and mouse, and the stakes were higher than I ever could have imagined. We weren't just dealing with an HOA power struggle anymore. We were in the middle of something much darker. The next few days were a blur of tension and unease. My grandfather had always been the calm in any storm, but even he seemed shaken. Whatever was going on behind the scenes, it was much bigger than we realized. We started digging, reaching out to neighbors, checking security footage, and even going through old HOA meeting records. It wasn't until we pieced everything together that the truth hit us with the force of a freight train. Karen wasn't just some rogue HOA board member causing trouble for the neighborhood. She had been working with someone. A larger, more dangerous network of individuals involved in real estate schemes, using the HOA as a front to push people out of their homes and buy up properties for next to nothing. They were using fear, intimidation, and manipulation to control the neighborhood, and Karen was their pawn, doing their dirty work. The missing piece of the puzzle clicked into place when we discovered that Karen had been receiving large sums of money from anonymous sources, money that had been deposited in her account after each issue she caused within the community. She wasn't just being a bully, she was getting paid to be one. But what none of us expected was the level of ruthlessness the people behind her were willing to go to. We finally tracked her down, finding her in a rundown motel on the edge of town, desperate, paranoid, and clearly afraid. She broke down, revealing everything. She had been threatened, blackmailed into doing their bidding. But she also told us something else. She hadn't disappeared because she wanted to. She had been warned to stay away. And the worst part, the people pulling the strings had already set their sights on someone else, my grandfather. As we sat there, listening to her tearfully confess, the door suddenly slammed open. Two men, wearing dark suits and cold expressions, stormed into the room. It was clear they weren't here for a friendly chat. My grandfather immediately stood up, his years of experience as a sheriff kicking in. "Get down," he yelled at me, and in an instant, everything went into chaos. The men were fast, trained, much faster than I expected, but my grandfather was no amateur. He took them down with precision, his moves swift and calculated. It was a blur of fists, the room echoing with the sound of struggle. Just as it seemed like the worst was over, one of the men reached for a hidden gun tucked inside his jacket. Time seemed to slow. I froze, not knowing what to do. But then, without warning, Karen jumped in front of the man, knocking his hand away just in time. The shot missed, shattering the window behind us. For a moment, there was silence. The men were subdued, and the danger passed. But Karen's final words left me speechless. It wasn't just about the HOA, it was about control. And now they'll come for all of us. As the police arrived to arrest the men and begin unraveling the full extent of the conspiracy, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Sure, the immediate danger was behind us, but something told me the network of power and corruption ran far deeper than we ever imagined. My grandfather, though victorious, looked at me with a grim expression. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. And just as we were about to leave, the phone rang again. I didn't need to hear the voice on the other end to know it was far from over. The final twist was still waiting for us, and this time, it was going to hit even harder. The phone call turned out to be a lead, but not the kind we expected. It was from someone on the inside, someone we hadn't considered. A former HOA board member who had been quietly gathering evidence. They knew about the network of corruption, and they were ready to expose it all. The pieces were falling into place. The men we'd fought off were just the beginning of a much larger operation, one that reached deeper into the community than any of us had realized. With Karen's help, we were able to hand over the information to the authorities. They launched a full investigation, and the truth about the real estate conspiracy came to light. The HOA board was disbanded, and the properties they had illegally acquired were returned to their rightful owners. As for Karen, she didn't escape unscathed, but she found a way to start over, finally free of the fear and manipulation that had controlled her life for so long. Looking back, I realized how much had changed in such a short time. What seemed like a petty neighborhood dispute turned into something far darker, and in the end, it wasn't just about standing up to Karen. It was about standing up to a system that had abused its power for far too long. My grandfather, once again, had proven that integrity and justice could triumph, no matter the cost, and for that, I would forever be grateful.